The calm before the disrespect. This isn't just a story about hospital walls or white coats. It's about something deeper, about dignity, perception, and how a single moment of bias can become a national reckoning. What began as a routine emergency room visit turned into a defining test for everyone involved. At the heart of it stood a pregnant woman in pain, dismissed, unheard, and unseen. But what no one in that hospital knew was this: the woman they ignored was married to the man who owned the hospital. A man who didn't just have wealth, he had influence, and he wielded it with precision. As this story unfolds through confrontation, reckoning, and reform, it will lead us back, right where it began, to a woman in need who simply asked for help and was told to sit down, because by the time we reach the end, you'll realize this story doesn't just finish where it started. It finishes by changing what that start meant. The invisible cry for help. The rain tapped impatiently against the ER windows as Ava stepped into the sterile, fluorescent, lit lobby of St. Marlowe's Medical Center. 8 months pregnant, soaked from the storm, she clutched her side as another sharp contraction rippled through her abdomen. Her breath hitched. Something wasn't right. She walked slowly to the front desk, one hand beneath her belly, the other gripping her ID. The nurse behind the counter didn't look up. The television behind her blared a morning talk show. Phones rang, charts clattered, but Ava, very much in pain, very much pregnant, was invisible. "Excuse me," she began softly, her voice strained. No response, just the rhythmic clack of keyboard keys and the casual sipping of coffee. Ava tried again, more firmly this time. "I think I'm in labor. The contractions, they're close." Still no urgency, no concern, just a vague, dismissive nod toward the waiting chairs, and just like that, a woman in pain was told, without words, that she didn't matter. Protocol over humanity. Karen Wallace, a veteran nurse with 2 decades of experience and a superiority complex to match, didn't even flinch when Ava approached. She scanned the woman's face, young, tired, black, alone, and made a split-second judgment she wouldn't even remember later. "We're backed up," Karen said sharply without eye contact. "Have a seat. Someone will call you." Ava's hand trembled as another contraction shot through her spine. She leaned on the counter. "I'm really not feeling well," she said, wincing. Karen looked up finally, but not with empathy, only annoyance. "Ma'am," I said, "someone will see you when we're ready. Please don't cause a scene." "Cause a scene?" Ava whispered, stunned. Karen went back to typing, indifferent. Another face in the crowd, another problem she didn't feel like solving. What Karen didn't know, what she didn't care to ask, was that Ava's name came with weight, and her silence would soon break the entire building's foundation. One word that shook the system. Ava sat quietly in the corner of the waiting room, her breathing growing shallow, each contraction closer than the last. Her eyes scanned the chaotic ER, full of movement but lacking attention. Nobody was coming, nobody cared. She inhaled slowly, pulling out her phone. Her fingers trembled, not from panic, but from pain and exhaustion. She opened a secure message thread labeled simply J, and then she typed it. Now, no punctuation, no explanation, just that single word. It wasn't a plea, it was a signal. A quiet but thunderous knock on a door only one man in the city had the key to. She hit send. Then she closed her eyes and waited, not for a nurse, not for a doctor, but for the man who had promised her once, "No one ever makes you feel small while I'm breathing." Across town, in a corner office high above the skyline, Jameson Cole read the text. He stood without a word, buttoned his jacket, and said to his assistant, "Clear my schedule. I'm going to the ER." The arrival, the automatic doors of the ER burst open, not slammed, not stormed, but parted like stage curtains at the start of a powerful performance. Jameson Cole walked in with the calculated calm of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Dressed in a custom-cut navy suit, eyes like steel, and energy like a loaded weapon, he scanned the room. Heads turned, security stood taller, doctors went still, and Nurse Karen finally looked up. Her stomach dropped as she recognized the man every hospital administrator across the city feared upsetting. He wasn't just rich, he owned the place, the largest shareholder of Cole Care Medical, the man who signed the paychecks, whose name sat in gold letters outside the boardroom, Jameson R. Cole. He walked straight to Ava, knelt beside her, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered, "I got you, baby." Only then did the real panic begin, because the woman everyone ignored, she wasn't just a patient. She was the boss's wife, and suddenly every second of neglect would have a price. Realization hits the ER. The air inside the emergency room thickened as Jameson Cole stood tall beside his wife. Staff froze like statues in his wake. The receptionist whispered into a phone. An orderly dropped his clipboard. It was as if a ghost had entered the building, one that wore designer shoes and carried authority like a crown. Dr. Caleb Morgan, chief of surgery, appeared in seconds, visibly pale. "Mr. Cole," he stammered, "we didn't know you were." Jameson didn't even glance at him. His focus stayed on Ava, now grimacing through another contraction. Karen stepped forward cautiously, voice weak. "Sir, I wasn't informed she was." He turned to her, calm, lethal. "You didn't need to be informed to treat a woman in pain. You needed eyes, ears, and humanity. You chose none of them." Karen felt her stomach churn. She had dismissed countless patients before, but this time her indifference had a spotlight, and its name was Jameson Cole. The confrontation, Jameson's voice dropped to a chilling calm that silenced the room. "You saw my wife, a black woman in labor, and you ignored her, not because of policy, not because of workload, but because you assumed she didn't matter." Karen swallowed hard, trying to find the words. I didn't know who she was. That's the problem." He said, eyes locked on her. "You only treat people with respect when you know who they are." The staff around them watched, stunned. This wasn't just a dressing down. It was an exposure. Dr. Morgan attempted to intervene. "Let's handle this in private." "No," Jameson said flatly, "because she didn't ignore my wife in private. She did it here in front of everyone. Let them witness accountability." Karen's lip trembled. Her authority, her confidence evaporated. Jameson took Ava's hand. "Let's get you to someone who actually cares." As they wheeled her away, the silence left behind wasn't just fear, it was awakening, because the hierarchy of power in that hospital had just shifted forever. The best for the forgotten. Within moments of Jameson's command, the hospital transformed. Hallways once sluggish now buzzed with urgency. A team of top-tier OBGYN specialists assembled in minutes. The head of anesthesiology cleared his schedule. Room 9B, a private, state-of-the-art birthing suite, was prepared as if royalty were arriving. Ava, once left to suffer in silence, was now surrounded by experts who finally looked at her. Ely saw her. One nurse gently held her hand, another read her vitals. The attending physician, shaken and sincere, leaned close. "We're here now. You and your baby are in the best hands." Ava, exhausted, gave a small nod. Not because she trusted them, not yet, but because her husband stood behind her, eyes fierce, watching everyone like a sentinel. This wasn't privilege, it was justice being forced into action. And in a place built to protect life, it took power to remind them that every life mattered. The hammer falls as Ava rested. Jameson remained in motion. He requested security footage, timestamps, intake logs, all the receipts of the indifference his wife endured. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply asked questions no one wanted to answer. By evening, Nurse Karen's badge access was revoked. Her locker was emptied and a formal HR notice was delivered, signed at the top by Jameson himself. But he wasn't finished. That night, in a boardroom filled with stunned executives, Jameson stood at the head of the table. "This isn't just about Ava. It's about every patient who wasn't married to someone like me, who walked in scared and left ignored." He signed an order for immediate internal review and announced an overhaul of hospital training protocols. "If care is selective, it's not care, it's control, and I won't allow that in a building with my name on it." The room was silent. The reckoning had begun, and this time it wouldn't be behind closed doors. A city watches accountability in action. The next morning, the press gathered outside St. Marlowe's like bees to a hive. Rumors had already begun to spread, whispers of a scandal involving bias, neglect, and the billionaire who refused to stay silent. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. Jameson stepped up to the podium. No notes, no teleprompter. Only truth, my wife came here in pain and she was ignored, not because of the volume of patients, but because someone decided she didn't look important enough, gasps, pen scribbled. He continued, that stops now. Effective immediately, St. Marlowe's will implement mandatory anti-bias and empathy training for every staff member. Clinical and administrative, no badge will be immune. His words didn't just ripple through the hospital. They echoed into every healthcare boardroom across the city. This wasn't a PR move, it was a message. Power should protect the powerless, and silence is no longer an option. A new dawn, a legacy reclaimed a few days later. Ava was discharged. She stepped through the gleaming hospital lobby, cradling her newborn son, healthy, peaceful, and blissfully unaware of the storm he'd arrived in. But his mother remembered, and so did the staff, who now greeted her with respect. Not because of her last name, but because the culture had been shaken. As Ava passed the front desk where she'd once been dismissed, she paused. The nurse behind it, new, young, empathetic, stood and offered a kind smile. Mrs. Cole, she said softly, congratulations. Ava smiled back and nodded. She didn't need revenge. This change, was the justice. On her way out, she looked up at a new plaque near the entrance, recently mounted. In this place, compassion sees no status and care knows no color. Outside, Jameson waited by the car, door open, pride in his eyes. Let's take him home, he whispered, and as the doors closed, they didn't just leave a hospital. They left a legacy rewritten. The power that waits quietly. Some forms of power don't arrive with sirens or spotlights. Sometimes they wait, quietly, respectfully, until they're needed. Ava didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand the world stop. She simply existed in her truth, in her pain, in her worth, and that was enough. Jameson didn't come with fury. He came with accountability. Together, they didn't just fix a moment. They sparked a movement, and in a place where one woman was once told to wait because she didn't look like someone important. Policies changed, people awakened, and a system, so used to looking through people, was finally forced to see. So the next time someone walks into a room and asks for help, maybe, just maybe, they won't be asked to wait. Because now, the memory of Ava in that ER doesn't end in silence. It begins a story of justice, and that story started in room 304.